education. And so we'll see that in the second half of our meeting today. But in the first half, as usual, we are going to have a listen question. So we have a scenario here. You are building a coalition to develop and advocate for education policies or education policy. What kinds of groups do you include outside of education organizations, outside of the education community, and why? So we're going to give about 10 minutes in those breakout rooms. I will go ahead and get those set up now. And I'll go ahead and drop this prompt in the chat, and then a couple times in your breakout room as we're going. We'll discuss that, and then we will come back and have a group discussion and share our answers. So give me just 1 second, get this all set up.
Yes.
All right, breakout rooms are open. Go ahead, and I will let you know when we've got a minute left. All right, everybody came back at once today, which must mean we were having some good conversations. And so the best part is now we get to continue those outside of our breakout rooms. So what did y'all come up with? Looking at building your ideal coalition, what kinds of non-education groups would you include and why?
Jackie.
So one of the ones we talked about at the end there was community resource organizations, possibly food banks and things like that. I had said my work colleagues, but I work in a community resource center. They're already engaged with the schools, providing snacks and working with Title I schools and free and reduced lunch, and very well aware of those issues. So it's kind of natural to extend that to the rest of what's going on in education.
I think that's an excellent point, to take a group of people who are already so close to the issue. Because a lot of times when we talk about adding new organizations, we're talking about people who are interested but not necessarily connected. And so I think that's a great point. Others? Kathy?
I spoke for my organization, the League of Women Voters of Colorado. And part of the reason is that we have local leagues we have 19 local leagues across the state. And so we can muster advocacy and a voice. Plus we really follow legislation, and I'm the one who follows, I'm one of the ones who follow the education legislation. The other group that I brought in, because of an article that's today in the Washington Post, would be a group aligned with gun violence prevention in schools. And that's what that article today was all about. And I pulled it up from the group that I was in, but I can add it to the chat here. Because it was really
that would be wonderful, Kathy. Great, I love both of those. Who else? Barbara?
A couple. We have Weld County Latino Coalition, and I think that look for diversity. We have Latino women of Weld County. They're very active in education issues anyway. We talked a lot about the business community and what's that? Chamber of Commerce. And maybe some student voices in groups.
Yeah, that's a great mix. And we've, I think we've had some struggles with, the Chamber of Commerce in the past, but I think they're really powerful, and they're sort of in the center of everything. And if we want business that's a place we need to look. So I really appreciate that suggestion, as well as the youth voice too. That's something that we're trying to do right now at Grade Ed. And so our newsletter includes a youth voice. We have a youth coalition. And so we're taking steps toward making sure that the youth have a bigger presence and a stronger voice in this area. Who's next? Sally.
We didn't talk about this, I think, because I got us off track, but in my group, but the real estate people, the article that was in the paper a couple days ago about District 27J, which is up north somewhere. They finally passed a mill levy, but their real estate values have gone flat because they've had to go to a 4-day school week. And, that may be a place where we really need to address the issues of, if our schools aren't good, nobody's going to want to be here. Nobody with kids.
Thank you, Sally. I think that's a really good point. Others?
Well, this is Jan. I'll step up. I think on the arts groups in Colorado Springs, in our district, we have a partnership with the Bemis Art Center and the Fine Arts Center, and kids can do programming with them, and we're gifting, awards through Bemis for kids. And the big thing, not maybe today so much, but it's today, but we let arts go because we didn't have any money. So they can step up and help us with keeping the arts in our schools.
That's awesome. So we have an issue-specific group that, advocates for something in schools. And we usually, it's not super often that we incorporate groups like that are just focused on an issue like that in schools. But I think it's really important, especially for elevating those voices that don't get heard as much. And the arts is something that we hear about that I think sometimes falls by the wayside. So thank you for that. Other voices on this?
This is Lisa from Summit County. We have an interfaith council in our county that would be probably good. And then in addition to the youth voice, since our demographic is shifting in Colorado, the senior voice. And one last thing. And I also spoke with my county commissioner, and they have a county commissioner association in Colorado, and she would love to be more versed in education, but isn't at the moment.
Great. I think that sounds awesome. So to sort of go over to a related question, just because we only have a couple more minutes to discuss this before we move on to our presentation. Why is it important to you that we have groups outside of education advocating for education?
Because we get dinged all the time by saying that we're not consulting them. We're not consulting business. We're not consulting other folks, and we don't even know what they want. We're putting out graduates that they don't want, or we're not even figured out. So yeah, we need to be inclusive of all those folks that are getting our students.
Great. Kathy?
I think we gain their perspective for looking at solutions, because we might not consider certain aspects of solutions that are proposed. And it might just give us a fuller understanding of the impact in the community in different ways.
I really like that.
I think, especially in rural districts that where growth is stagnant, economic growth is stagnant, that you really need to involve the business community and the different civic groups, as well as the groups that are active in far as you know, trying to help your community grow, and instead of, you know, living in the past and doing away with everything and you know, doing away with curriculums that are diverse and stuff like that. I think it takes a community, especially, I mean, at least in the rural areas, it takes a community that's willing to show a little progressive thought and to willing to fight, or to, you know, to coalesce and solve some issues that the community, that involve the entire community.
That is a great point. Others in our last couple minutes? How about, hey, Mary, do you have any thoughts? Or sorry, Barbara, I'll let you go first and then I'll pick up Mary if we still have time.
You want Mary?
Oh, go ahead, Barbara. You had your hand
Oh,
up.
I was just gonna say, I think it's important to have both parties there and representatives, because I'll tell you, we had a mill levy override just recently, and there are some people, or yeah, I think, yeah. That was an extension of a mill levy override. And it as uncomfortable as it was good to hear the real opposition to what we're doing. And once again, I think that shed light on what the strategies needed to be in order to sell what we were trying to promote.
All right, I got time for one more, and then we're going to move on to our presentation. All right, let's just go ahead and move on to our presentation because it is big, it is important. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two presenters tonight. We have Susan Meek and Tracy Rainey with us. Tracy is somebody I work with a lot. She is an authority on all things school finance. She's the executive director of the Colorado School Finance Project. Susan used to work at Great Ed. She is a communications whiz. She's also a consultant, and importantly, she is on the Douglas County School Board. So she is in the thick of these education policy debates that we have here and all around the state, really. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to both of them. Susan, do you have screen sharing ability? Have you? Okay, great.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for having us here. As Ben said, I'm Tracy Rainey. I'm the executive director of the Colorado School Finance Project. And we want to talk a little bit today about the ESSER dollars that came into the state. And for many, it seems like that was years ago. But we want to kind of walk you through that timeline and trajectory so that you're able to hopefully ask us some questions and also know where you have some resources in order to be able to get information for your communities. The next slide, please. So we have a variety of organizations and entities that are helping us, our partners in this work, and wanting to make sure that, as you were talking about earlier about coalitions, that we're not doing this in isolation and we're getting input and we're getting feedback along the way, because what our goal is to have information available for every school district. And we feel the best way that we can do that is to make sure that we're hearing from the people who are directly involved with students, but also those that are with coalitions or organizations that support K-12. The next slide, please. So we received this grant about a year ago from the Department of Education, and it's a technical and communication grant that we have to provide assistance to districts, to provide them resources so that they have information that they can communicate with and be able to talk about their individualized story of where they spent those dollars, what the important items were, and then thinking about it from the standpoint of what happens then as these dollars begin to disappear. The next slide, please. So when we talk about telling your story, one of the things that we also wanted to make sure is that we weren't creating more work for school districts, but we were aligning items as in our work regarding the how they were going to have to report where these dollars went. And so the feds came up with 4 areas that districts could utilize COVID dollars for. One being creating safe and healthy learning environments. Secondly, addressing lost instructional time. And as we really want to talk about it in the sense of disrupted learning, it's not necessarily a loss. Meeting mental health needs of students and staff. And lastly, supporting educators and staff stability and well-being. So these are the 4 big buckets that districts could put dollars towards. So go ahead, Susan, the next slide. So when we now are going to our website, and you can find this by going to the CSFP website, and you will find that there is an ESSER tab. You can click on that tab, and you will find individualized fact sheets for every BOCES, as well as every school district in the state. You can hover over that map and different information will come up, or you can scroll down and just click specifically on a particular district. But we have our tools and information available so that every district will be able to find their individualized fact sheet for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 so far. We're in the process of working with ESSER 3 data and determining, again, through our feedback loops, the best and most important information. But we do know that in ESSER 3, we have to be able to focus on showing that a minimum of 20% of those dollars went towards disrupted learning, and that there is an engagement component that every district must meet as they move through the ESSER 3 expenditures. The next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and she will be able to walk through. But please make sure if you have questions along the way, don't be bashful, put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll be happy to answer as we go.
Thanks, Tracy, and thank you all for being here to listen to this presentation. We're really excited to talk with you, but also answer your questions. We know there's lots of questions out there around the ESSER funds. Lately, we've been talking about it being ESSER halftime. So this graphic is a great way to explain what we're talking about. If you look above the timeline area, you see the federal funding. So on the top left, there's a red box that says addressing the crisis. That was really the first round of ESSER funds that came in. So Colorado received about $121 million in ESSER funds through round 1. Those dollars had to be obligated by last September. So those dollars have actually been spent, and they really went towards addressing that immediate crisis. The second round of funds that came in through ESSER 2, that was about $519 million. Those dollars were meant to help provide stability in managing the crisis. Those dollars came in right at the beginning of 2021, and they need to be obligated by September of this year, 2023. And then the third and final round of federal dollars that came in through ESSER 3. It was over $1 billion, and those dollars were meant to address recovery and acceleration. Those dollars came with ties attached as well. There were some requirements around engaging your community, requirements around a minimum of 20% going to address learning loss, what we like to talk about accelerating learning. And so those ESSER 3 dollars will expire by September of 2024. So you can see we really are right about in the middle right now of this window of opportunity where schools receive some significant funding that really was meant to help students as they navigate the effects of COVID. Something that we heard loud and clear was that we can't tell just the federal funding story. We really need to talk about what was happening at the state level as well. So if you look underneath the timeline, there's some boxes that correspond. The right when COVID hit and that budgeting process was starting with ESSER 1 dollars coming in, that is when the state budget crisis hit and the budget stabilization factor doubled for school districts. And so this graphic really is meant to help tell the story of what is happening during this window of time. And with that, I am going to ask a quick poll question. So give me a second to bring that up. Let's see. Here we go. So of all the federal stimulus funds that Colorado received, what percentage went to education? So go ahead and take a guess. Was less than 5%? Was it between 5 and 30%? Was it between 30 and 60% or more than 60%? So just looking at the first question right now, of all those federal stimulus funds that were received, what percentage went to education?
Hey, Susan, I'm not seeing the poll. I don't know if anybody else is having that problem.
I see people are clicking on it.
Yeah, I got it.
I see it.
Okay. Yeah, and there's actually all three questions are listed. So I'm going to read all three and give you time. So the second question is, do you know where your local school district invested its ESSER funds? So that's the second question, yes, no. And then the third question, are there restrictions on how those funds can be used? Yes or no, or unsure. So take a moment and go ahead and answer these three questions, and then we'll share. All right, I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. I'm going to share the results. Are you all seeing this? Tracy, are you guys able to see the results?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So looks like about 20% less than 5% went to education. About half of you believe it was between 5 and 30%. 21% believe it's between 30 and 60. And then we have one person more than 60. So I'm going to show you the answer to that in just a moment. Do you know where your local school district invested its ESSER funds? And 70% say no. So you're in the right place. We're going to answer that question for you. And then lastly, are there restrictions as to how the funds can be used? And about 80% of you said yes. So you're correct in that there are restrictions. The answer to the first question, so of all the federal stimulus dollars that came into Colorado, education received 4.6% of those funds. It was a lot of money that education received. And when you look at the totality of all the funds that came in, it turned out to be about 4.6%. So you can dive into this even further if you go to the CSFP website. We have a link to research and studies, and so you can learn a little bit more. For each of our districts, for every district in the state, and there's 178 school districts, we have developed fact sheets. And so as Tracy was mentioning earlier, when you navigate to the CSFP website, you can click on your district and you can see where the dollars are spent. And we have launched ESSER 1 fact sheets and we've launched ESSER 2 fact sheets. And so on the ESSER 2 fact sheets, we help dive into looking at the largest investments made by each district. So this pie chart that you're looking at, there'll be a different pie chart for every school district, because it's telling that school district's unique story of where they invested their ESSER 2 dollars. And it will fall into various categories. The second chart that you'll find is a unique chart for those top 4 investment areas. How was the money allocated? And I know it's probably hard to read this on the screen here. The dark blue shows employees. So you can see, did it go into employees? Did it go into curriculum or supplies or materials? The reason we really wanted to highlight when it goes into employees is because you run into sustainability concerns. These are one-time dollars. They will end by September of 2024, and either school districts need additional resources to continue those programs, or they need to reallocate their money away from other activities into those programs. So again, those fact sheets are really meant to help school districts be able to be transparent with their local community, tell the story of where funds have gone, and also the sustainability aspect to those funds. So as districts are currently in the process of doing their budgeting or getting started with budgeting, these are great resources for the district to use to help explain to their community where one-time dollars have been invested, where there are sustainability concerns moving forward. So in addition,
Susan,
yes,
could I just add one thing?
absolutely.
It's important for people to know these dollars came to districts through Title I. So you can have 2 districts that are right next to each other. You think they look basically the same because you have the same number of students, but the amount of funding that could go to those 2 districts could look dramatically different based upon their demographic breakout and did they qualify for more Title I funding. And that's a federal formula, so it's not anything that was done in Colorado. That's how all the funds were distributed nationally. And so that's why when people will say, well, our district didn't get very much or our district got a lot, it's because of that formula and the distribution. It's not because a district has done something wrong or right.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if everyone understands Title I, and I think Tracy said it's based on your free and reduced lunch rates in your districts. And so actually when ESSER funding came in initially, there were some school districts that received $0 in ESSER funding. And so the Colorado Department of Education actually did supplemental funding through their own amount of funds that they had to help those districts that actually did not receive any funding through that Title I allocation. Thanks, Tracy. In addition to having those individual fact sheets on the website for Colorado School Finance Project, there are communication resources. And so these resources are meant to help explain the importance of investing in the various areas that, that school districts made their choices. And so there are key messages and tips for trying to help the community who oftentimes isn't as closely involved with this district understand where the resources were spent and why. And there's other resources for school districts to help talk about the short-term and long-term impact on their students. Again, the dollars that came in were meant to address the effects of COVID on students. And something else that is definitely worth mentioning, right now, school districts across the nation are wrestling with all kinds of pressing issues, largely stemming from the pandemic. So we have declining enrollments, we have the accelerated learning needs for students, and there has been a persistent and growing student mental health crisis. And so these resources are really important to help address these areas. And when allocating the ESSER funding, districts are struggling to balance the immediate need to address these issues with longer term priorities and investments. And so there's this balancing act that's underway, and knowing that they also have those sustainability pressures that have to be considered as they're making those choices. And so to gain a greater understanding of some of these district budget priorities and challenges that our schools are facing right now, Colorado School Finance Project, through its grant, has launched a survey partnering with the Colorado Education Initiative to survey school districts and boards and communities to really give a glimpse as to what those key priorities are right now for everyone. And so we will be releasing that information in the near future. So again, as districts look ahead with their priorities and their needs, our hope is that these resources are helping them to engage their local community, to help their local community understand where choices have been made, and to help people engage productively with their school district as they move forward in the budgeting process. And so with that, I know we wanted to make sure that we save time to answer questions. And thank you, Delana, for putting the website links in there. I also want to thank all of you for being such passionate supporters for public education. The past several years have been really, really challenging. And we need advocates out there that are advocating for public ed. So thank you all for all of the work that you do. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you, Susan and Tracy. Questions?
I just want to say that, when you ask, do we know how the district spends it? It's there. I mean, no, I don't know everything, but I know how to get it. That's why I answered yes. I guess I'm totally naive about how much money education got out of all that. So I was way off on how much money we got.
Well, Jan, most people are way off when I ask that question, which is why I asked the question.
Yeah.
And, we didn't really talk about this, but, there are media stories out there talking about how schools are swimming in money and they've hired tons of administrators and they're building luxury, they're spending it on luxury projects. And so there's a lot of spin that's out there. And also you have other people doing webinars saying it's a bloodletting when these funds go away. And so there's just a lot of sensationalism. And I think it's our hope to really put out facts and information so people can engage productively. And with that, I see Katie has raised her hand.
Hey, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm not familiar with the website, so I'll take a closer look. But I was just wondering, has there been data collected regarding compensatory education services for children with special education needs who may not have received all of their services during the pandemic? I don't know if that information has been collected in an aggregate fashion. So if it has, I was wondering where to find it.
I don't know that it's been collected in aggregate fashion. I know every district was challenged on how they were going to deliver the services. And part of that was a balance working with parents and providers. And so I don't think that there has been anything that has come forward. I would say that's going to be something that will take a while to probably look at, and especially looking to see, okay, what was the impact and lessons learned. And I think all of that process is just beginning in many arenas.
Yeah, and I don't have much more to add other than we are working to look at data district by district and looking at those that have higher numbers of students with special needs, and also looking to see higher poverty districts. And so we're trying to disaggregate the data that's out there right now. And I think it is pretty early to have concrete information.
And so the answer to Sue's question is yes, in that graphic that we showed, that includes all the different types of dollars that came into Colorado in various forms and at different times. And that includes the entire amount that came in for education as a percentage of everything else that came into the state.
Other questions for Tracy and Susan?
I have one, if you don't mind. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hands.
Go right ahead.
I noticed in the website I went to look, but Montezuma Cortez is not listed in that, or doesn't have a you can't click on Montezuma Cortez RE1 to find out where their funds went. I'm just curious if that's because they haven't provided information, or if I'm missing something.
We need to look into that. They should all work, and no, it's not a matter of if a district reported it, because we're pulling every district did have to report information, and then they are the districts are the ones who put it into their categories, and we're pulling that information directly. So if you're finding that doesn't work, let us look into that and get back to you, and we'll make sure that we give Ben the information so he can get that information out to the group.
Thank you.
And
I
Tracy?
also have a comment. I'm from Jeffco, and Jeffco had the vast majority of it was other. So, I mean, I can certainly ask our CFO and other people what it is, but is that common, or are we unusual to have such a large other category?
No, it's not. And if you look at the bar graph, then it'll probably break it down for you. So you'll see the pie chart, and then the next one will be the bar graph. Most of that is going to probably then get aired out as you look at that and see, okay, did that go into people? Did it go into technology? And so that other category, it could be in the learning loss. There's various areas that could have gone to, and looking at the bar chart should be able to get that narrowed down for you. And then from there, in the ESSER 3 work, we're in the process of even streamlining it down one more notch. But so hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah, Mary, and I'm happy to try to help you look at it in more granular detail too, if that's helpful. Some districts have other categories which aren't as helpful. But we're here to help provide information. So we're happy to work with you on that. And Tracy, we have a question in the chat. Can ESSER 3 funds be reallocated to a new charter accepted to district that was not in the district when ESSER was applied for, and after allocations made without allowing public input?
Well, my initial thought would be no, because it has to be COVID related. So if this charter is COVID related, then maybe a district could do something, but I think there's probably a lot of nuances before you would get to just a straight allocation, because as we said, these do have strings attached to them. And so the idea that you'd be able to change from being COVID related to something new or different would initially appear to be stretching those uses.
It is worth highlighting, districts do have the ability to revise their budget. And some definitely need to, because they thought they would hire personnel and there are teacher and employee shortages. Or they thought they would spend it on some kind of equipment and there are supply chain issues. So districts do have the ability to revise budgets. And that is something that we are trying to work with districts to make sure that they have the information they need in order to do so.
But they have to be used, as we said, in those
Yeah.
4 buckets.
Yep.
It's not like they can decide they want to do it for something else. And like I said, they are all restrictive, as it has to be COVID related.
Exactly.
Any more questions in our last 3 minutes?
So if the charter doesn't qualify for Title I, then I guess what I would say is that if they have gone to the district and worked out something with them that is a COVID related issue, then maybe the district has made a decision to do something that would give them resources. But that would be because of how the district and that charter are looking at whatever that rationale is for the use.
Shirley, if you need help connecting with the right person in the district to talk with them, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, we are more than happy to walk through or talk to people individually about certain things within a district, or if something doesn't make sense to you on a fact sheet that you're looking at. You have our contact information. Don't be bashful. We're more than happy to walk through it with you and then try to figure out answers.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tracy and Susan. I've seen this stuff before, but I learn something new every time I see it, I think. It's complex, and it's really important. And I think it's, really important, especially for foregrounding what kind of solutions we need long-term to this crisis, because this is just another example of, this is an example of the federal government stepping in, in a way that the state, even if it had to, couldn't. And so thank you so much for your presentation. And would you mind putting your contact, Tracy and Susan, would you mind putting your contact information in the chat there, so people can reach you if they have questions? Great. All right, Delana, I think we are good to stop our recording for this evening. I will hang around for just a few minutes in case anybody has any questions, and then I'll